Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out today. And I know you know what an honor it is that for us to have a international scholar and musician in our presence today. Dr. Fraschillo, as you are well aware, is past president of the American Bandmasters Association and past president of the National Band Association. Our session today is twofold. It's to talk about his career time here in Mississippi, but it's also as a videography project for the National Band Association, since he is a former past president of that organization. Dr. Fraschillo, if you would, I had the pleasure, I'd have to share this with you. I've had the pleasure of serving as his associate at Southern Miss, and it was a true honor to work in his presence on a daily basis. He's just magnificent, and so thank you again for agreeing to do this for us today. I know they'll appreciate it as well. If you don't mind, please share with us some of your biographical information, like where you were born and all of this, the stuff that everybody may not know about you.
Well, I am a native Mississippian. I was born and raised in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And how many of you know where Clarksdale is? I mean, you know, Clarksdale. I was the child of a wave of Italian immigrants who had come to this. And those of you who know anything about that part of Mississippi know that there are lots and lots of Italians up there. And last night, my wife and I were at dinner at this beautiful Monmouth mansion bed and breakfast that Justin put us at, and this gentleman and his wife came up to us, and we had been talking to some people across the way, and I asked the lady in Italian if she spoke Italian. She said no, and this man and his wife came over, and they just began to speak Italian like crazy, and I thought, in Natchez, Mississippi, you know? So there are lots of people that are in this state that came through that wave of migration of people to work the farms, you know, to work those plantations in North Mississippi. And so that's how I got here. And my father was a World War II veteran and was a dear man, and he passed away early on in life. My mother didn't pass away until 1998, and she lived well in her 80s. And my mother, you know, played the piano. My father sang a lot, so I had a kind of a natural understanding of music. Growing up, I begged her to teach me to play the piano because I loved listening and that sort of thing to the piano, and it became just an obsession with me. And so when I went to Catholic school, she enrolled me in piano in the second grade, and I began playing the piano in the second grade, and I still play when I can. You know, old age has not been kind to me with my essential tremor, but other than that, I still play when I can. So, what was the question again?
Back to some of your biographical experiences.
Yeah.
Tell us about how you became involved in the band program, and tie it into another Mississippi legend.
My entire, I can tell you, I've told this story so many times. I told it last year at the Midwest that I went to Catholic school. We had no band, all we had was piano. And so when I got out of Catholic school, we had to go to public school in the 9th grade, and I was absolutely lost. I was a fish out of water. It was terrible. It was the worst experience you can ever imagine. Because the Catholic kids, they'd call on you, the teacher would call on you, and the Catholic kids would all stand to answer the question. Well, you know, and then all the other kids in the room would laugh. And why were they laughing, you'd think, you know? But that was the way we were trained, you know? And then they would say, well, from the 1st grade on, and they said, well, you don't have to do that. So I went to the 9th grade, and one day in the spring, the band under William Graves, whose son is now passed away, was a very fine euphonium player in the Army Field Band. And his daughter was married to Joe Daniels, who just passed away not too many months ago. Those are names that you probably may not know, but anyway, I know them because I had their children in the band at Southern Miss. And Joe was the band director at Macomb for many years before he moved to Texas. But at any rate, I listened to the band and I thought, boy, that's really neat. I think I'd like to do that because I'd never heard a band before, ever, you know. And so I went down to the principal's office and I signed up for band. I hadn't played anything, you know, but the piano. So in the summer, Kent Sills called me up and he said, Tom, we're getting all the kids together for our first rehearsal for band. And he said, you don't have anything down on your form from the principal's office about having been in the band before or what you play. And I said, well, Mr. Sills, I think I need to talk to you about this. I said, I played the piano. Well, you know, I live in a place now there are many, many highly competitive band programs. That the marching band, I mean, you know, it's essential that you do this, essential that you do that, and that you must, I mean, some of the bands, the fees for being in the band are $2,500 a year, and it's just amazing some of the things that people require nowadays. And Kent didn't bat an eye. He said, come on up to the band hall and let's see what we can put you on. See what we can find for you to play. And he could have said, I'm sorry, you don't play an instrument, so we can't take you. And if he had, I would be working at the Kroger store now, you know, and if it still exists in Clarksdale, you know, I would, because he was very, very important in my life. I went there and Kent, I remember Kent trying to strap on a field drum on me, and he couldn't figure out, that was the days before the carriers, and he couldn't figure out which leg neither could Jeff Capwell, who was also at the band director at that time. Very few of you remember those names, Elvacade would, and Lloyd, but anyway. But that's basically, Kent was the reason that I went to Southern Miss, because he was a graduate of Southern Miss, and Bill Moody, who was later highly influential in my career. Bill was at Southern Miss at the time, and that's basically why I went there. So that's how I got started in the band, you know, and you know, took it from there.
And connect your time at Southern Miss to your first student teaching experience or your student teaching experience with another legend.
Yeah, when I was at Southern Miss, that's when you finished school in 4 years, you know. And so, including student teaching, you know. So the last semester I student taught with Gary Cook, who was at Petal High School. And Gary was a wonderful teacher, and it was a great experience. I learned an enormous amount from him. And after I got out of school and started teaching, Gary was so kind to me. He would come and say, no, I don't think you ought to play that. You know, when you go to festival, he'd say, no, I think that's a little hard, you know, for your band. And so he was really a great, a great mentor into that, as well as many other people that I know. I mean, I know a lot of people who student taught with Gary through the years, regardless of where he was, you know. He truly was.
Well, the next question I have, you've kind of touched on this, but let's see if there's anything you'd like to add to that. Your early connections to and experience with music.
We had a 78 RPM record player in my grandmother's house in the closet with a frayed cord on it. And I mean, that I'm sitting here today alive is testament that I didn't electrocute myself with that 78 RPM record. But we had 5 LPs. I found that in the closet. I mean, you have to realize we were not rich people. There are a lot of rich people that live in the Mississippi Delta, and we were not. I mean, we were on the other end of the spectrum. So there were 5 records in there, and they were all of Tchaikovsky. There was Sleeping Beauty, Swan Lake, and the Pathétique. And there were 5 LPs, and they were like this. I mean, looked like Frisbees, you know. And the reason that you say 5 is because that's all they could get on 5. Nowadays, you could get all of that and more on one CD, you know. One MP3 would hold much more than that. But and I listened to those records until I absolutely wore them out. That was my first experience, I guess when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And then my mom used to play the piano, I you know, just got hooked. It was something that I really, really enjoyed. I don't know what else I would have done, Dr. Schumann, had I not done that. You know, I really don't. You know,
I completely understand. Who do you consider to be your mentors or significant influences on your career?
I think probably, first of all, as I just mentioned, when I was a young teacher, Gary Cook, I first taught in a middle school. It was junior high school in those days. And then I went to Forest County Agricultural High School. Do you know where that is? And so I taught there for 2 years, and I decided I'd had all the fun there I was going to have. Because...
May I interject one
Yes,
thing? I have to share this with you. There was a colleague of mine when I taught at Stone High School, and she was in your band.
Really?
And she loved Mr. Fraschillo.
Really?
At the
Well,
time.
good.
Yes.
I'm glad she did.
She was in your band.
Because,
at
I mean,
Forest
that was
County.
the school that cows grazed on the same field that you marched on, you know, and you had to go out there. It's called agricultural for one reason, you know. So you had to go out there and clean up the field before you could march. But the kids, they didn't seem to mind, you know. They were just good, sweet little country kids, you know. But I had had all the fun I was going to have with that. And so Gary said, well, he said, why don't we drive down to Lake Charles? I understand that there's some jobs open in Lake Charles, Louisiana. So we got in Gary Cook's car. We put our suits in the car. And I know that Gary had no intention of leaving Petal, but he took me down there because he wanted to help me, you know. So we went down there, and he had called and arranged for an interview with Brad Daigle, who at the time was the supervisor of music. Jeff Capwell was at LaGrange High School, and Kelly Love was at McNeese. And so we went down, and I interviewed, and I taught then at Lake Charles High School, and had a really good time there, you know. And then the Meridian High School band came open, and I moved there. So I think that Gary helped me in my early stages. But then, you know, Bill Moody got latched on to me because Bill we had always been close when I was in college, and I always played the piano for Doug Graham, who was now retired, was the clarinet teacher at South Carolina. I accompanied Doug, and so Doug and Bill and I got to be really close friends. And I think the rest of my career, Bill fostered me and mentored me and helped me through the system of what we call our profession, you know. And Bill called me up when I was at Southern Miss teaching the band camp in the summer, and he said, now, I want you to come up here and work. And I was making, I don't know, $15,000 a year in Meridian, which was good pay at that time, you know. And he said, but we can only pay you $10,000. And I said, well, Bill, I can't come for that, you know. I just can't. But besides that, you know, it's just not worth that. So he said, okay. So the next year he calls me and he said, well, we need for you, I want you to think seriously about coming up here and working on a doctorate. So I did in, I don't remember, Cecilia, when, 83, 82, 83, maybe 83. Yeah, 83, 84 maybe. It doesn't matter. I mean, but, you know, I went and Bill worked me through the doctoral program there, and I had a great time with him. Bill had enormous, he was very intelligent. He had a great experience. He'd been the band director at Southern Miss. He'd been the director of bands at the University of Texas. He, you know, was a Minnesota grad. He had his doctorate from Minnesota. So he came from a whole different part of the world that I was not familiar with, you know. And so I think that if I had to say anybody who really helped me in my career, it would be Bill Moody.
This is off the cuff here, but were you the first graduate from the USC program with the
No,
doctorate in
no,
conducting?
the violin teacher who was at Southern Miss was the first, Jerry Luchtenberg.
Okay.
Yes, she was the
remember
first,
her.
and I was the second, yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
Who, when she talked, it was like she had stepped out of a Tennessee Williams play, you know. I've always depended on the kindness of my friends. You thought that she was an old Southern belle, but she played good violin, and she was a good teacher as far as I know.
She was my undergrad string methods teacher. I remember her vividly. Yes. Great. Share with us some of the significant experiences, musical experiences that you've had in terms of achievement with your ensembles or performances you've had with your ensembles, and how these performances or achievements shaped your life as a teacher.
When I went to Meridian High School was 1975, and Meridian had integrated in 1970, and it was a very difficult time for the school system, very difficult. But we worked through it, and we did a really good, we built a very, very good program. We had 10th, 11th, and 12th grade in the band, and finally in 1980 we played at the Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic with that band, and it was, that was probably one of the highlights of my career, having played at the Midwest. And actually, I go back and listen to that recording, and it's not too bad. It really isn't, Catherine. For the fall, it's not that bad, Colin. You would not be embarrassed, It's not that bad. And people didn't walk out, We played a piece that Jimmy Slaughter had just finished, had won the Oswald Award to finish the concert. But I think that's one of the things. And then I had many significant, when you work in a university like Southern Miss, you have some great experiences with some great students, And I think that the students that I worked with there were that, musical experiences like that were wonderful with grad students and undergraduate students. We had some good, 1991, we played at the National Convention of CBDNA, and we played 1993 at ABA National Convention, and 1998 or 97, I don't remember, we played at another CBDNA National Convention, and then we ran out of money. That's when we really had to stop traveling. That's when the football band stopped traveling. But those were really good. They were nerve-wracking and very, as you understand, having done that, and it can be when you go to play for your colleagues who have really good ensembles, you are really concerned. And, we have to realize, folks, I can say this because I'm from Mississippi. You have to realize that there is a stigma. It can't be good because, Mississippi does step on its foot a good bit. And I know that now because I live in Atlanta and I read the Atlanta Journal-Constitution every day. And you can read some things. And then the lawyer last night, he was speaking Italian to me, said, a lot of that's just not true, what you read in the newspaper. And I said, well, maybe it's not, but it's bad perception. And life is about perception, So if you got to work harder, is what I'm saying. You have to work harder to prove that we are as good as they are, any place else. I would put my Southern Miss band, or the band that Catherine had last year, that I was fortunate enough to conduct, I would put my Southern Miss band up against the University of Illinois band, or the Indiana band, or any of those groups. Good players are good players. You may not have the depth that those schools have. Indiana may have 35 or 40 clarinets that could sit first chair in the Southern Miss Wind Ensemble, but you don't have that many. But nevertheless, it was those experiences at Southern Miss. This afternoon, I think one of the other great things is to see your students be successful. I flew over last week. Justin flew Cecilia and me over last week. And we went to his rehearsal, And I was so impressed with his band. I mean, he had done such a great job, and Justin was a really good student, but you never know whether really good students don't always make really good teachers, you know. You hope that they will, but old Jim Croft used to say, you know, you put it out there, it's like a dog. You put the food out there in the bowl, and the dog doesn't always eat it, you know, and then they come back 10 years later and they say, well, you never told us that. And yes, we did. We put it out there. It was in the bowl. You just didn't eat it at the time, you know. So, but he's done such a great job, and it's so wonderful to see the success of your students, or like Cliff, for instance, you know, or like you, who've done such great work and are doing great work, and you know, it's wonderful to see that success. I had, even last year, some kids from Meridian called and talked. Cecilia does Facebook a lot more. I don't do Facebook very much, but she does it. And some kids from Meridian got in touch with her, and they came by to visit us in the mountains, and we just had a wonderful time. They'd been in my Meridian High School band, and our Meridian High School band. So it had, you know, the success of your students, I think, is one of the true joys of what we do.
Absolutely. Do you have any interesting life or career stories that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I told you one outside, but I'm not going to tell you. I can't say.
Well, maybe.
Well, I could edit it. You know, I had this trumpet player in the band at Meridian that was absolutely a terror. He was a terror every day. Every day there was something he would do. He would do it on purpose, you know. And so finally we got him graduate. But his mother was an attorney. No, his best friend's mother was an attorney. So you didn't dare try to get rid of him from the band because you knew that his mother would be after you, you know. So you just had to be really, you know. So he finally graduated, and I go out to get on an airplane one day at the airport. And guess who's loading the baggage on the plane? He was. And I thought, man, my bag will never make it to Atlanta, you know, if he sees my name on it. So, you know, I've had those kinds of experiences. When I moved to Lake Charles, that was another different experience. You know, you'd have a band party. And, well, the first time I took the Lake Charles High School band on a band trip, this majorette threw a whiskey bottle out of the window before we ever left, you know, and we came back, and I threw 8 kids out of the band for drinking. And the principal, I cannot remember his name now, but Gautreau or one of those, you know, French names, he couldn't understand why I wanted to throw him out of the band. Drinking's not a big deal. I said, well, if they're going to drink on a band trip, what in the world, what could they possibly, I mean, think of the liability, the danger that it presents to everybody. But they didn't see anything wrong with that, you know. So that was kind of an interesting experience, you know. But I had been born and raised in Mississippi where you just didn't do that. I mean, that was, and they had probably been doing it for years. I told them not to do it, but they did it. So, you know, other interesting experiences, we've had a lot that I've had. When I went to Southern Miss, I could tell you dozens that I had with wind faculty that were just lock horns, man, and whoever came out on top would come out on top. And generally I did. Because
this is true.
Because, as you well know, the band has the money, you know what I mean? The band has the money, and, you know, they got to depend on you for, so, I mean, make a person dependent and they'll be happy, you know? Well,
you're absolutely right. Can you share with the audience today your philosophy or approach to teaching music or in life in general? Philosophy by which you live.
Well, you know, now I live by the philosophy of going to the doctor when I have a lot of doctor's appointments. But I think nothing is more important in our lives, really and truly, and I mean this sincerely, Nothing is more important in our lives than the pursuit of knowledge. And the learning is such an important thing, and I don't always understand why people don't understand that. Sometimes, I mean, and you have to understand that unless you get out and vote, and unless you get active, and for things, and you know, the people that are going to the legislatures in various states, they don't always think that learning is that important, you know. But I think the pursuit of knowledge has always been my key goal. Cecilia and I talk often about a professor. His name was Munsell. Donald Munsell taught. He was a bassoonist, and he taught bassoon, but he also taught a lot of music history classes when I was working on my master's and when she was working on her master's. And I did my bachelor's and master's at Southern Miss. And I learned so much from him, and I just kept my head in a book the whole time. And when I went back to work on my doctorate, I just kept my head in a book the whole time, because, you know, that's just what you have to do if you're going to finish a degree. But I think that I still try to make myself do certain things to learn, to continue to learn, you know. Cecilia and I are very close friends in New York that got us involved in the International Wind Society, EGEB it's called. And we go to that every 2 years. And it's a musicological society based in Germany that they have, most of their membership is in Europe, but a lot of it's in America too. And a lot of graduate students go over there to present papers, you know. We go, a lot of the lectures are given in German, which doesn't help me very much at all, but because I can't understand a word of it. You know, I'd sit and listen and very polite and read the blurb that they've given you, which is not the right word for it. The right word's not coming to me. But we very interested in that. Yeah, well, yeah, basically the translation or the short version of what they're talking about. But we've learned a lot from those people, and they're very serious about. 4 years ago, we were there, and a man came in who had saxophones from the very beginning of the invention of the saxophone. Now, I'm telling you, folks, if you think, some of you don't like saxophone, but I've had some remarkable saxophone players. Harry White was one who just played exquisitely. Harry just came to see us in the mountains not too long ago, and he lives in Europe now, and he plays professionally. But Harry was from Starkville, Mississippi. Okay, you know Harry. This guy had saxophones from the beginning. If you think the saxophone may sound bad now, you should have heard that when he played on that was the earliest invention. It was god awful. I mean, the scale was just terrible. I mean, it was just awful. But then as they progressed, they got much better. So what we did was he got all his saxophones out, and he had a piece of music that he played with each one. And he spoke a little English, mostly German, but I accompanied him on the piano, and we played everything. We played, and then he had the contrabass saxophone. I mean, it was enormous. I can't remember what we played on. It was for the Saint-Saëns Carnival of the Animals, the elephant. Yeah, and it was, you know, apropos that it was appropriate. That society has meant a lot to us. Raul Camus is a very close friend of ours. He's the one that got us involved in that, he and Amy. And I learned from Raul that Raul is 86 years old. Raul's basement looks like the Library of Congress. You know, he has more books down there. And Amy always says, now what the hell am I going to do with these books when you die? And the thing about it is, you have to understand that Amy and Raul are from New York City. And I mean, they're pretty right up front. I mean, they cut to the chase, you know, right at it. And Raul has always doing something. He's always working on a paper to present here or there or the other. Amy is 79 or 80 now, so say 79. She's a cellist. She still plays cello in a string quartet. She teaches some classes at a junior college there, near them, in the City of New York system. And she plays the cello in several orchestras there in town. And so, I mean, in New York, in town. So anyway, they are constantly learning and constantly doing. Amy constantly reading, and you know, that's very important, is the pursuit of knowledge. And my philosophy about teaching is I think music is probably about teaching music is such a very important thing. You know, I can remember the day that Trey Greer learned to use vibrato on the saxophone, or that Jenny Lang learned to use vibrato on the flute, or that Lanice Major, God bless her, who is dead now, learned to really, really play well. You know, those are significant times in your life that, teaching music is such a very important thing. It moves kids, it moves people. I watched yesterday the Bush funeral on the plane on the way over, and Jason Fettig is a good friend of mine. He is the Marine Band conductor, and he did the music, and it was just wonderful. You know, he's a great conductor, and the music, music is, you know, it's part of who we are and what we do, you know. Absolutely. So, go ahead.
What do you consider to be your best teaching strength?
My best teaching strength? How about fear? That's one of them, you know. I think that might be. Lloyd Turner used to say when he'd come by the band hall, he said, "I've seen you picking on a fourth horn player a lot," you know, and I'd say, "Lloyd, I'm not picking on him. I'm just trying to make him play," you know. Lloyd was too kind as a teacher. That's your, you know, you're too kind a person. Not anymore, yeah. I think, I don't know, but I think if, rephrase that question again and let me think about it one more time.
What do you consider to be your best teaching strength?
Well,
and I'm going to just offer a little help. I think you're very inspiring from the podium.
Well, I try to be.
Without question.
Yeah, I try to be, and I try to be inspiring on the podium. And one of the things that was always helpful at Southern Miss is that I speak Italian. Or I've worked very hard to learn to speak real Italian, not pig Italian. You know, I shouldn't say that because somebody here might know some of my cousins in Saviano in Italy and tell them that, but they speak a dialect, and you know, that was the language of my father, and my grandparents never spoke English hardly at all, and so they spoke a dialect though, and so I worked very hard to learn to do that. So I used to communicate with that a lot in the band, and the Spanish kids loved it. You know, they always seem to understand. But I think that motivating kids is the whole. That's what we do. I mean, you know, they're motivated through music, but that's not the only thing. I mean, the orchestra conductor, Mr. Spano, you know, Robert Spano, excuse me, the conductor of the Atlanta Symphony has to motivate those people just like you do as a high school band director, a junior high school band director. They just play a hell of a lot better than your people do, you know, and a lot better than my people did. And they can give a concert a week, you know, whereas you can't give a concert a week, nor could I, you know. But they have to have motivational skills as well. But I always thought that I had several I always thought that I could teach the flute really well. I could teach the clarinet really well. The saxophone, the woodwinds, I did very well on those, the oboe and the bassoon. And Cecilia, thank God, was the brass person, you know, because she was a trombone player and could teach the brasses and understood, you know, I know how it works, but I don't know how it works because I don't play a brass instrument. And I think if you don't play a brass instrument, it's really hard to understand, Kyle. I mean, you play the French horn. You still play the French horn? Yeah. The horn, excuse me. I don't mean to call it the French horn. It's the horn, yeah. But I mean, when did you graduate, Kyle? In 03 finally. 03 finally? Okay. Well, but you were in the wind ensemble a couple of years, weren't you? I thought you were. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. But where did you go to school? Ruston. Okay. All right. Well, you wised up and crossed the state line for anyway. That's came to Southern Miss. Go ahead, Mo.
Okay.
What's next?
What are your thoughts on programming for the wind band?
I think that you need to play quality music. Now, there's a lot of quality music out there. You just got to look for it. You know, you really, really do. You don't play things that are, okay, I'm going to play something that just is going to make the band sound good. You have to play things that are teaching tools, and it has to be quality music. And where do you get quality music? Well, you look for quality composers.
Okay.
But I mean, you listen, go online and listen. When I was a band director, you couldn't, when I was teaching in school, we didn't have the internet. Now you have the internet. You can go to J.W. Pepper and listen to the website. When I'm picking clinic tunes, I don't do a lot of clinics anymore, you know, I really don't. It's time for somebody else to do that. And I'm doing one this year for Joe Brazier. Cecilia and I are doing it, and we're only doing it because it's Joe, you know. But you can go to J.W. Pepper website, or all the C. Allen has a website. All these places have MP3s. You can listen. And a lot of times you can look at the score, you know. Right, so right. I wouldn't, you know, anyway. Go ahead.
What's some advice that you have to offer young band directors or people about to enter the profession?
Well, I think they need to stick it out, learn as much as you can about the instruments. You know, if you can't teach the instruments, they're not 10 things that are going to make a band, like number one. It's not like a recipe, you know. You have to be able to teach students to play their instrument well. Therefore, the combined unit will be good. If they can't play their instrument well, you're not going to have a good band. And I tell, you know, I know it's difficult, but you have to be able to find a way to give them lessons, or to get lessons for them, or some way that they can understand what a good trumpet sound is, what a good trombone sound is, and if you live close enough to a university, I mean, if you live close enough to Ole Miss or State or Southern Miss, I mean, or the community colleges, they all have, you know, teachers that could give lessons, you know, or they may have students that could give lessons. And they don't cost that much. Kids spend money on a lot of things that are far less worthwhile. But unless you have really good individual players, you can't really make it. Now, I know that sounds idealistic. I know it does. But I know that in Meridian, that's the way we built the program, with really good individual players. I used to call it the star system. You know, everybody wanted to be first chair. They wanted to be first chair flute. They wanted to be first chair clarinet. And so we worked very hard on that. Not everybody, you know. Cecilia had a kid that would come to band every day with rollers in his hair. And by the time they got through with the warm-up, he'd have the rollers out, you know. So, I mean, he wasn't interested in being a clarinet player, you know. He wasn't interested in much of anything, I don't think. But so, you know, I should have included that earlier, shouldn't I? In the interesting moments.
Yeah. That's okay. It's all in there. It's all in there. Can you tell us about the importance of the National Band Association?
The National Band Association is an association that's for everybody. Has a really good journal that has really good articles in it. One of the great middle school band directors in this country is Gary Barton. Gary Barton was a Mississippi kid. He went to Greenville High School. He went to Memphis State, didn't he? I know, but he got his master's there. Northeast Louisiana, that's right, with Jack White. And when he graduated, I hired him at Meridian. And he has done nothing his entire career, but, I mean, he was a Pied Piper. And he was an excellent, excellent teacher. He moved several places, but finally landed in Texas, in the Houston area, and taught there the rest of his career. And he's just a wonderful middle school band director. He really, really is. So I think that the NBA. Gary, NBA. Yeah, Gary writes for the NBA every journal. And every time there's something in there really good and really informative about picking music or about motivating students or disciplining students, because that's a big part of what we have to do sometimes as well. We don't want to admit it, but it is. And so, I mean, you're not the only one that has to do that. Everybody has to do it. So Gary has an article in there every month. Various people submit articles. But the other thing, there's the National Band Association has an excellence award for various high school bands that if you submit tapes, I mean, it's a really good thing for your school if you receive that sort of thing. It's a band organization for everybody. A lot of the other organizations, I mean, it would be foolish for you to join the CBDNA. I mean, you might. I mean, if you're university band director, yes. College Band Directors National Association. But if you're not, I mean, if you're a middle school band director teaching in, Natchez or Vicksburg or, Stone County, why would you join the CBDNA? I mean, there's no reason for you to, you know what I mean? So it's an organization that you really can benefit from. And I think that if you look at the journal alone is something that you can really benefit from. So.
Great. We're getting close, near the end. What do you want your colleagues and former students to remember most about you?
Oh, Lord. Well, I
that was an added question.
Yeah,
that was not in the NBA list, but it's an interesting year.
I used to, well, hopefully I would hope that they remembered that we made really good music, that there were times with the Southern Miss Wind Ensemble that I mean, it was a plateau that you often don't reach, with students, and it was a plateau. They felt that they had reached a plateau as well. And with the Meridian High School Band, like the two kids that came to see us with their wives last year, Steve McCrae and his friend, what is Mark Robinson? Mark Robinson told me and Cecilia, he said, if it hadn't been for you all, he's a businessman. I don't know what he does. He lives in Baton Rouge, but they had moved him to New York for a year, and he and his wife lived there in New York City for a year. And he said, if I hadn't been in the band with you all, he said, I would have never gone to the Metropolitan Opera. I would have never gone to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He said, I learned about those things from you guys, that art and music and those kinds of things were important. So, I would like students to remember me as having made good music. There are those who would, I know that there are lots of, you have students who hate your guts. I have students who really, I know that I have left scars, because sometimes you just have to do what has to be done, in order to make things happen. And that's just the way it is. But that's life too, but we tried not to make as many as, So I think that's probably one of the things that other than that, you know.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. I'd like for you to speak. We have Mrs. Fraschillo here today, and I
She
know
is
she's
here.
been a tremendous
That's
part
right.
of your life, so if you'd like to touch on that.
Cecilia joined the Meridian High School band program in 1978, 75. I thought I went there before that. No, I thought I went there in 75. Okay, I got the years mixed up. She came in 75 and took the second band, and Lester Pleasant went to the middle school, and Barton was at the other, no, yes, Barton was at the other middle school, I think. And so things really began to take off, you know. And the band at the high school really began to take off because Cecilia was doing the second band. And that was a tough gig, man. You know, sometimes you'd have 15 saxophones in that band. And I would take 6. I mean, that's all you could have in the first band. But she would have an instrumentation that was just awful. But, you know, she would make it happen. And so she's been very supportive of my career, and I hope that I have been supportive of hers. And she fought the battles in Hattiesburg in the middle school for all the years I was at Southern Miss, for the 28 years I was there. And when she retired at Ann Arbor Middle School was her last job. And that was a tough school because all of the kids there were low socioeconomic level students. All of them were pretty much on free lunch, and it was a very difficult place to teach. But they were very happy with what they did, and they felt like they were doing something because Cecilia made them feel that way, you know. I think, you know, you have to have somebody that's supportive in your life, and it's really important. So, yes, sir.
One thing I did want to point out again, speak very quickly about your experience with the Mississippi Lions All-State Band and some students from Meridian High School.
One day in 1978, Joe Berryman, who had done the Lions Band for years, just decided he wasn't going to do it anymore. And it was about to go down the tubes because there was nobody to do it. So Cecilia and I took it over, along with Jane Carson, who was a band parent in Meridian, and we took it over, and we did it from then through I don't know, 80-something, 83, and when I went back to school to work on my doctorate. I was in the Lions Band in high school. It was a very important part of my growing up. It was not nearly the band that it is now, nor was it the band that we had, you know, when I had it. Kent did a wonderful job with the band through those years, and now Jeff's doing a great job with it, and I hope that, you know, it's a great motivator for the student in this state. It truly is. Was that what you wanted me to?
One of the
Oh,
milestones.
and yeah, and one of the things that I was most proud of is that we put the first African American students in the Lions Band. There had never been any African Americans in the Lions Band until we had Darrell Thomas, and anyway, we had, I can't remember all of their names now, but those two clarinet players, Scotty Bates and Rita Stennis, those kind of kids, they were clarinet players, and they played, man, they could blow snakes out of the horn. I mean, they really could. We did, one year, I always tried to play a transcription, you know, and then a contemporary piece for the festival. And one year we played William Tell Overture, and those two girls were first and second chair, and they were in the Lions Band, and they were way up in the Lions Band too. They were not down in the section, and they could really play, and they were motivated to play, and I felt that, you know, we worked at it, and so I mean they were great kids. You know, every child, you have to understand that every child can learn. And I think in our climate today, with as much division as we have going on in this country, and as much acidic kind of demeaning that we have of certain kinds of people and certain races, certain colors. It really bothers me because every kid can learn to play, and every kid can be successful. You know, they can be, and I know that for a fact. I've seen it happen.
Right.
You know, I have students from the Meridian High School band who are doctors now. You know, they don't all have to be, you know, Al Sells, who's who's the NFL helmet man now. You know, so I don't know whether you all know who I'm talking about. Al was Kent's son, and he's now he's a practicing neurosurgeon, but he also is head of the NFL concussion. Do you know what they call it? Do you know what they call it? Anyway, he has an office in New York City, right, and one in Nashville at Vanderbilt. You know, and so he goes back and forth, and he's studying that for the NFL, so that when they get hit like that, they're not. But at any rate, I think.
Last thing, any closing remarks?
Gregory
that you
would
have
say,
that
"How
you
was
would-
the play, Mrs. Lincoln?" I guess, you know, it was, you know, it's been a very, very good ride, and my career has been very enjoyable. You know, it is hard work. I mean, you know, if you think that being a band director is not hard work, you're crazy. You need to get you a job at, you know, at the Winn-Dixie or at the IGA or something. That's easy work. You just, you know, punch those numbers in there, and apples and bananas and whatever. You don't. Being a band director is a whole new story at any level, you know.
Well, Dr. Fraschillo, I want to personally thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you very much.
Share with us your experiences
Well,
throughout your
I hope
career.
you will come and hear Justin's band, because it's really, really good. I've got to go. It's 2 minutes to 6,
To showtime.
to 5, I mean. Well,
We'll all be there.
as
We'll all be there. And we look
also,
forward
as
to-
Gregory says, 2 minutes to 6 real people time. And I said, well, Gregory, I lived in Central Standard Time for a long time, and we considered that real people time, you know. So at any rate, thank you so much for coming. It's so
Thank
nice
you.
to see you.
Thank you, Dr. Ed.
I appreciate you coming. Yes, sir. My pleasure. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.